The reading this morning is from John chapter 21, 1 through 14. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. And he showed himself in this way: gathered there together with Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples. Simon Peter said to them, "I am going fishing." They said to him, "We will go with you." They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, you have no fish, have you?" They answered him, "No." He said to them, "Cast the net to the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because there were so many fish. The disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on some clothes, for he was naked, and jumped into the sea. But the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, only about 100 yards off. When they had gone ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there, with fish on it and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. And though there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now none of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the 3rd time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. Peace be to God. For the reading of the gospel.
The title of today's message is Jesus Among His Disciples, Part 3. As you know, we've been dealing with the book of John, and so here we are in the last chapter of John chapter 21. During my study, I did come up with the question, and the question is, do you know who he is? That's the question for today. And the Synoptic Gospels, which contains Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are about Jesus' place in history of Israel and the resurrection. John cares about Jesus' place in the whole scheme of things, from creation to redemption and the resurrection. That the Messiah is none other than the eternal Son of God is the ultimate good news of the Christian story. The book of John's Gospel is one of the greatest treasures of the Christian faith. The story is told from a perspective after Jesus' resurrection and the gift of the Spirit. John writes to reassure us of the truth we believe in light of defections and rejection, that through the incarnation, God is fully and finally known to us. Here we see God's love full and on open display. This is the 3rd and final time Jesus will visit his disciples. He meets with them in Galilee. The disciples have left Jerusalem because the festival of unleavened bread was over, and they are now traveling to Galilee. The feast of unleavened bread reminded them how they were freed from slavery in the middle of the night. To depart on their journey, they had to be willing to leave unprepared and totally dependent on God for survival, direction, and protection. This Feast of Unleavened Bread is about how one escapes and their need to wait for Christ. This is why in the wilderness, and I love the Torah, those are the first 5 books of the Bible, and it talks about being in the wilderness and how they moved in the wilderness by a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. This is how they moved. And they did this because they were completely and totally dependent upon Christ. If the cloud didn't move, they didn't move. If there was no pillar of fire moving at night, then they didn't move. Before we make a move or do hastily things and run ahead of God, how many of us are maybe suspect or guilty of making a move or running ahead or before God, only to find out that we need to wait on the Lord? Here's a lesson to be learned by remembering God will supply our needs. Calm down, take a deep breath, relax, and let God work it out. God is in control. The Feast of Unleavened Bread lasts for 7 days. If you have an A-type personality, eating matzah bread for 7 days and waiting might stress you out. I know it'll probably stress me out. The whole idea is to celebrate pursuing a life of righteousness by remembering you can depend and trust on God. In other words, you can wait faithfully for the Lord without a doubt or a pout. However, we can increase our faith in God, who will manifest, encourage, and provide for us because he knows what's best for us when the time is right for us, although we may not know or understand or even be in agreement with God's timetable. Simon Peter told the disciples that he's going fishing, and 6 of the disciples decided to go with him. Simon means he has heard or obedient one. Peter or Petros means rock or stone. So when you say Simon Peter, you are really saying the rock has heard or an obedient stone, or the stone is obedient. The NASB Study Bible refers to a period of waiting. Have you ever had to wait for God to show up on the scene in your circumstances? Are you waiting on God to manifest himself now in your predicament? It's not that he can't do it or that he will not fulfill his promise. God will manifest himself on God's time. And maybe you might say to yourself, oh God, manifest yourself in my life now, right now. The Lord has instructed them to meet him at the Sea of Galilee. Matthew 26, verse 32 says, but after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee. Jesus manifested himself to his disciples on the Sea of Tiberias, which is also called the Sea of Galilee. In the New Testament, the true meaning of manifest is to uncover, lay bare, or reveal. In this text, God is uncovering the disciples' mission. He's laying bare his will for their lives and revealing their purpose on earth. Matthew 28, verse 10 says, then Jesus said to them, do not be afraid. Go, bring word to my brothers to leave for Galilee, and there they will see me. Who are the 7 disciples who went fishing? Simon Peter, who denied the Lord, doubting Thomas, and Nathanael, James and John, they are called the sons of Zebedee, and two other disciples, Andrew and Philip. Here are three lessons for you in the text. One is to start. Two is to grow. And three is to go. Start, grow, and go. Start. When someone is giving you a second chance at something, start it. Don't delay. Don't second guess it or doubt your ability. Start doing it, whatever it is. Just get started. Jesus forgave Peter and gave him a second chance. Why? Because Peter's name means had heard. And Jesus also knew that he was obedient, because that's what his name also means, obedient one. He just needed a second chance. And many of us just need a second chance to get things right. Jesus manifested himself to encourage them. Sometimes you have to encourage yourself. I'm reminded of David the psalmist, who wrote, "I encouraged myself in the Lord." You can start to encourage yourself today. However, commentator Gill says that the disciples began fishing in the evening, and they fished all night and caught nothing. He compares fishing to being a gospel minister who are fishers of men, although they take every opportunity to evangelize and gain souls for Christ. Sometimes our best efforts do not succeed, which defers our hopes and dashes our dreams, causing us to search for other streams. What do we do? Where do we go? And what do we say when things look like they are not going your way? I challenge you to look to Jesus, the author and finisher of your faith, who is going to keep you from going astray. Grow. After the disciples had been fishing all night, their nets were empty, they heard a voice who said, "Do you have any fish?" They replied, "No." This unidentified person responded back, "Cast your net on the right side." When they obeyed the instructions and cast their net on the right side, they received a harvest. John said, "It is the Lord," as if to say, "I know it could not be anyone else but you." John realized that the stranger on the shore who had been speaking to them was Jesus. It was John who sat next to Jesus at the table. And it was John who stood by the cross, embracing Mary, while Jesus was crucified and died. It is love that recognizes the Lord and shares the good news with others. It is the Lord. Jesus waiting all night for them to catch nothing. Then somewhere between dawn and the break of day, Jesus says, "Cast your net on the right side." My question is, why did he wait? Because Jesus is omniscient. He is all-knowing. He knows what is best for us. He knows when, why, and how. He knows this from that and that from this. Although omniscience cannot be found in the Bible, but the truth of God is being omniscient, is revealed through the scriptures. Are we to depend on the Lord because of his omniscience? Yes, we are to depend on the Lord. We're to wait and look for the Lord. This was the feast of the unleavened bread. It was about depending upon the omniscience of the Lord, waiting. Why? because the Lord knows all. He's an all-knowing God. This was definitely a growth spurt for the disciples. And we too can learn from growth spurts to wait on the Lord. When John recognizes who Jesus is, Peter, the obedient one, hops out of the boat and swims to meet Jesus. How many times when we recognize that the Lord is faithful to us, do we run to the great I am? When you go home, read verses up to verse 14, which you heard today, and you will find 3 surprises in the text. The first surprise is when the disciples caught 153 large fish after catching nothing. The second surprise is that Jesus is right there on the shore with them. And the third surprise is Jesus has breakfast prepared for the disciples. In the text, Jesus is full of surprises. Now we know why Jesus selected the disciples, and so many of them were fishermen. He selected them for several reasons. In one of the commentaries, it said that fishermen have faith and courage to go out into deep waters. Fishermen also have patience and are persistent. They will not quit or give up until their mission is accomplished. The next quality about a fisherman is they know how to cooperate with one another and work together. And they were skilled at using the equipment and the boat. That's why Jesus was waiting to see their endurance during times of struggle. He could have said something at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. He could have told them to cast their net on the right side, but he didn't. He waited. And many times we go through things and God is waiting for a response. He's waiting for not any response, but the right response, a response that will depend on him and look to him. People may have courage. These are examples for us to follow in order for us to catch fish, not only to catch fish, but to win souls for Christ. People may be courageous and may speak courageous words or eloquent words, but someone knows that you care for them by your actions. You've heard of the saying, actions speak louder than words. There's a song that says, they will know we are Christians by our love. Go. As you go today, remember, what is one step you can take to show your love to others? And 2, in what ways does your life serve as a testimony to what Jesus has accomplished? I know last week I was speaking with one of the members here, and we were talking about being and I hope I get the terms correct, nationalist versus an internationalist, and how a nationalist is a person who is maybe someone who is familiar with a particular place or situation or people, and that's where they stay, and that's what they do. But internationalists are people who step out across the road, across the street, and greet someone who's different from them, maybe their situation, maybe their lifestyle, maybe their family situation is different, and maybe you would never even think that you would have a conversation with this person. But as an internationalist, as a person who's willing to show the love of God, you forget about who you are and step out in faith to others. You go. And so today, I am challenging you to go and show the love of Christ to others.